Nitai. Om Jnana-timirandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurue Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padkamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sahagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Svitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vikas Swami Niti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesh Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauritvise Namah पंचतत्त्वात्मकं कृष्णं भक्तरूपस्वरूपकं भक्तावतारं भक्ताख्यं नमामि भक्तशक्तिकम् हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिकान्ता राधाकान्ता नमोऽस्तुते जायतं सुरतोर्पङ्गुर्मम मन्दमतिर्गते मत्सर्वस्य पदम्भोजो श्रीराधा मदनमोहनो दिव्याविन्दारण्यकल्पद्रुमादौ श्रीमद्रत्नागरसिंहासनस्थौ श्रीमद्राधा शीलगोविन्ददेवो प्रेष्ठालिभिः सेव्यमानो स्मरामि श्रीमान् रासरसारम्भी वांसीवट ततः स्थितः कर्शनवेणुस्वनैर्गोपी गोपीनाथः स्त्रियस्तुना तप्तकञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंदा श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवास आदि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. What I will do is read the last paragraph one more time. We start from hence pushy preachers, but just for continuity we will read one last paragraph and then as a repeat and then move on. Hope all of you are okay with that. Dandavat pranams, Shri Sham Prabhuji, and everyone. Unfortunately, the world is inundated by countless permutations of bogus ideas. Massive demonic indoctrination urges people to act in ways highly detrimental to their own and others' self interest. Considering that even mundane propaganda requires insistent repetition to make an impact, this understanding being the basics of the advertising industry's relentless touting of sense gratification, surely on only the most dynamic counter promotion of genuine spiritual values has any hope of being noticed. Hence, pushy preachers, impelled by the pressing necessity to arouse dupes to the real welfare, regularly exhort others to immediately take to Krishna consciousness as the only real necessity and inform them of the ominous consequences of not doing so. For they cannot tolerate that people who have achieved the rare human birth, a birth suitable for worshipping the Lord, simply tread the path of misfortune, of non devotion. Considering that generally they will meet any specific individual from the general populace only once, and that it may be billions of lifetimes before that person will get another opportunity to receive transcendental knowledge. Bold preachers are inspired to induce people to at least once hear the message of the absolute truth, knowing that an exchange of pleasantries is hardly likely to be life changing or even remembered. Real preachers do not emit ineffectual, instantly forgettable mush. Rather, they can be purposely inflammatory, speaking in a manner intended to upset, in accordance with Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati's utterance that people need to be jerked into awakening their original consciousness. Some people are too proud or self absorbed to even begin to contemplate any position other than their own, no matter how politely or emphatically the Vedic truths are presented to them. Shock tactics, such as shouting or telling people that their civilization is centered on vagina licking, may be required to jolt such dullards out of their complacent stupor. A footnote: an example of this is a case of Arnold Das. No amount of reasoned arguments could have been scratched his ego, but one blunt sentence changed his life. End footnote. Although some devotees complain that such techniques are too provocative, provocation is exactly the aim of the direct preacher. Following the example of Sri Krishna, who began Bhagavad Gita by telling Arjuna that he was talking big but did not know what he was talking about. Similarly, because a direct preacher is genuinely concerned about the well beings of others, he does not try to put superficial hearers at ease, but might deliberately make them feel uncomfortable or even take the trouble and risk of purposely speaking words so bitingly true as to startle them into at least a rudimentary awareness of their precarious position and the actual purpose of life. One of the many examples of Srila Prabhupada's being blunt and provocative was his reply to an American hippie who had questioned him skeptically. "You cannot understand because you are crazy." To a polite but fatuous reporter from The Observer, a highbrow British newspaper, Srila Prabhupada directly stated, "You are so dull headed." Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati explained the necessity for such provocation in a parable about a boy flying a kite on a roof terrace. Totally absorbed, his eyes fixed in the sky, the boy does not see what he is close to the edge and in danger of falling off. Any commonsensical observer would call out to warn him. Only a madman would think he is enjoying himself, so why should I disturb him? A sane person must shout, "Be careful!" If the boy is a fool and a rascal, he will either ignore his well wisher or rebuke him. "Why are you distracting me? Do you think I don't know what I am doing?" Just to jerk the rascal to his senses and save him from certain doom, the observer may earnestly berate him. "You fool! You rascal!" Almost invariably, a straightforward preacher will be misunderstood, but by the very person he attempts to benefit. Although materialists might tolerate or even venerate a sadhu who, who unobtrusively endeavors for self elevation, they consider disturbing behavior to be uncouth and cannot associate it with saintliness. Mistakenly, mistaking the scolding of a genuine sadhu to be like the unpleasant speech of ordinary people, which is meant to belittle others, materialist rejects the sadhu as a non sadhu and the worst of cheaters. However, if a materialist has been sufficiently bothered and if he if he is at least somewhat thoughtful and sincere, then the inherent truth spoken by the sadhu will continue to nag him. Such disquietude will naturally lead him to ruminate as to why anyone would undergo trouble and risk to perturb others, and he may thus begin to comprehend how sadhus have wholly dissimilar motivations from everyone else in the world. Becoming intrigued, he may start the process of further inquiry. In other words, even if people are at first shocked by a sadhu's apparently pungent comments, if they have any sincerity, they will gradually come to appreciate the veracity of his message. They then will be grateful that devotees have taken pains to attack their illusion. Thus, by vigorous preaching, devotees can penetrate skepticism, overcome opposition, and convince persons who otherwise would have remained indifferent and inimical. Indeed, many people who have become devotees, this is underlined, indeed, many people who have become devotees would not have done so if there is a footnote. As a disciple once related to Srila Prabhupada, I went to the New York storefront first of all, and I was a rascal. So they called me a rascal. So I became very offended. Later on, I saw that they were right. Conversation 4th February 1975. Hayagriva Das similarly narrated George Henderson, now teaching mathematics at Rutgers University, visits New Vrindavan for a couple of days. Laughingly, he recalls the time Prabhupada challenged him to display the universal form. When he leaves, he gives us a check for $200. The Hare Krishna Explosion, Chapter 16. Continue. I would not have done so if they had not been recipient of forceful preaching. In 1977 at Kumbh Mela, a young Mayavadi sadhu confronted Srila Prabhupada. When Srila Prabhupada responded heavily, Bhakti Charu Swami thought, why is Srila Prabhupada being so hard on him? May, maybe if he were treated softly, the sadhu could become a devotee. But actually, that man joined ISKCON a few months later and to this day has remained a full time devotee. It would be expostulated. It could be expostulated that it is counterproductive to speak in a manner likely to upset others, for nothing is gained and unnecessarily tension is caused. In response, it is true that sharp words are likely to provoke fierce reaction, but if a devotee is competent to rebut objections, then his aggressiveness will have created a platform for demonstrating both the fallacies of various popular misconceptions and the foolishness of persons who adhere to such fallacies. If a devotee's presentation is sound and clear, as it should be, then even if the person with whom he directly engages refuse to accept the point, others who are less bigoted are likely to appreciate it. But such But can't such belligerence be avoided? Can't devotees preach without being blunt? Why needlessly antagonize others? The answer is that the need for Krishna consciousness is so urgent, and the antipathy of the conditioned soul is so formidable that stinging words are often required. A preacher's mercy is his unpleasant reproaches, which are meant to cause people to understand their precarious position and thus save them from the much greater unpleasantness of prolonged suffering in material existence. Endless litanies of no treading no toe on toes, endless litanies of no treading on toes, smoothness are unlikely to ever pierce the false ego, whereas a few incisive shots from an expert preacher can immediately lacerate misconceptions that might otherwise fester for lifetime. Without doubt, a sadhu's words possess power to destroy the evil propensities of one's mind. In this way, sadhus benefit everyone who associate with them. There are many things which we do not disclose to the sadhus. The real sadhu makes us speak out what we keep concealed in our hearts. He then applies the knife. The very word sadhu has no other meaning than this. He stands in front of the block with the uplifted sacrificial knife in his hand. The sensuous desires of men are like goats. The sadhu stands there to kill those desires by the merciful strokes of the keen edge of the sacrificial knife in the form of unpleasant language. If the sadhu turns into my flatterer, then he does me harm. He becomes my enemy. If he flatters us, we will be led to the road which brings worldly enjoyment but no factual well being. Those sadhus who speak searing words to drive away the witch of the illusory energy are actually the only devotees, real devotees of Krishna and friends of the living entities. The conditioned living beings experiences the distressful quarreling of his wife and close relatives and is rudely treated by them until death. Yet he never desires to leave their association. Rather, he absorbs himself in trying to appease and serve them. But when a devotee of the Lord, who is always desirous of the living entity's ultimate welfare, chides him just once with instructions meant to drive away Maya, then that conditioned entity immediately makes plan to leave the saintly person for his entire life. If you actually want to perform devotional service properly, then you must accept the harsh language of the sadhu as the medicine by which Maya can be given up. This harshness of a sadhu should not be confused with that mentioned in Bhagavad Gita 16.4 parusyam as being typical of demons. Indeed, the overall message of Bhagavad Gita teaches that harshness is sometimes required to uphold dharma. As Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur instruct, speaking harshly is a bad quality, but if used for someone's benefit, it becomes a good quality. Analogous to neem juice, which although bitter, cures sickness. The harshly speaking sadhu perceives everyone in this world as bewildered by myriad delusions, of which they need to be disabused before they can even begin to comprehend the truth of Krishna consciousness. He sees that although many people like to appear open minded, reasonable, and concerned with higher values, very few are sincerely seeking the quintessential truth. Having entered a pact to remain forever within Maya, almost all are actually inimical to the truth. Thus, although devotees should speak with intelligence and reason, it is a mistake to think that most people are sufficiently clear headed and sincere to accept the truth if if it is dispassionately presented to them. The preacher has to have some fire. This is experienced by preachers of Krishna consciousness who, when presenting the plain, easily understandable, illuminating truths of Bhagavad Gita, such as the difference between the temporary body and the eternal soul, or that the material existence is miserable, or that everyone is constitutionally tiny and obliged to directly or indirectly submit to the supreme authority, are often met with evasiveness, ridicule, dogmatic, sectarian replies, or the most inane or convoluted counter arguments. All of this demonstrates that although many people want to appear as if good, sincere, religious, thoughtful, open minded, or searching for the truth, most of them are just deluding themselves and others by avoiding Krishna. As soon as there is a talk of this goodness and sinful activity, immediately they go away. Immediately. Yesterday, that gentleman came, and just when I began to talk about pious activities and impious activities, he immediately left. I have got another meeting. But even when actual truth is conveyed most tactfully to persons who are apparently interested in discussing the theoretical nature of truth, in many cases, the underlying disposition of aversion to Krishna is revealed. Quote, worldly persons possess a double nature. They express one kind of sentiment, but internally cherish a different purpose. Moreover, they want to advertise this duplicity as a mark of liberalism or love of harmony. End quote. Just because a person may be superficially nice does not mean that we should overlook his faults or act as his enemy by not attempting to correct him. We should understand that most pseudo seekers and ostensibly pious persons are actually attached to their minuscule perverted worldviews, which in their minds justify and facilitate sense gratification in various gross and subtle forms, and keep them forever distanced with Krishna. मते नशीने परतः स्वतो वा मिथो अभिपाद्यते ग्रहवृतानाम् अदन्तगोबे विसतं तामिश्रं पुनः पुनश्चर्विता चरणावनम्. Because of their uncontrolled senses, persons too addicted to materialistic life make progress towards hellish conditions and repeatedly chew that which has already been chewed. Their inclination towards Krishna are never aroused, neither by the instructions of others, by their own efforts, or by the combination of both. न ते विदु न ते विदुस्वर्तगतिं हि विष्णुं दूरस्य हे बहिरर्थमनीना अन्धा यथान्धे उपनीयमानस् तेऽपि ते अपि तन्त्रयम् उरुतामिनी बद्धा. Persons who are strongly entrapped by the consciousness of enjoying material life and therefore have accepted as a leader or guru a similar blind man attached to external sense objects cannot understand that the goal of life is to return home back to Godhead and engage in the service of Lord Vishnu. As blind men guided by another blind man miss the right path and fall into a ditch, materially attached men, led by another materially attached man, are bound by the ropes of fruitive labor, which are made of very strong cords, and they continue again and again in materialistic life, suffering the threefold miseries. End footnote. End quote. Many people are so completely deluded that they cannot even begin to recognize their affliction and are disinclined to take seriously even obvious truths. For instance, that no one in the material world can escape the miseries of birth, death, old age, and disease. An intense approach is required for cutting the arrogance of such fools, to pierce through the misconceptions and attachments that cover their hearts and to revive their original consciousness beyond false egoism and exploitive desires. आज्ञा जीवा निज हिते अहिता करिमाने गर्व चूर्ण हैले पाचे युगदे नयने. An ignorant person considers detrimental that which is for his benefit. Only after his pride is pulverized do his eyes open. Most people have never thought deeply about, let alone consciously registered, the assumptions upon which they base their life. They have been imperceptibly yet thoroughly trained to accept falsity as truth, to the extent of considering that which is harmful to themselves and others as being beneficial. As well programmed workers and consumers, they resent any worldview that impinges on their imagination of being independent and having freedom of choice and thought. They presume that whatever they are doing is fine, even if, as is normal today, their existence is hellish, and that they have no need to change anything in their life. Having no higher aim, they are content to work hard like asses to earn money to buy trinkets that are of no real use to them, to adulate sports heroes and music and film stars, and to vote for shameless rogues whose only motive is to manipulate them. They unthinkingly agree to be exploited by paper money and planned obs- obsolescence and accept as normal their being slowly killed by poisoned air, food, and water. Such asses become much disturbed if confronted with a Krishna conscious understanding, perceiving that it threatens to undermine their whole existence. The bold preacher aims to cut through the stupidity of such vacuous fools by declaring that The population is just a royal edition of the animals. That man did not descend from monkeys, that there is no happiness in the material world, that the whole endeavor of modern civilization is idiocy, exploitation, and cheating, that free sex, feminism, and democracy are bogus, or that even much that masquerades as altruism, religion, or spirituality are also just other forms of cheating. Having shaking them to attention, the bold preacher must then vindicate to them the rationale of such seemingly radical concept. Even in addressing persons who from the outset are sufficiently pious and interested to respectfully hear the message of Krishna consciousness, firmness and clarity are required. Although the general approach may be to encourage such persons in their pious tendencies, corrective instruction should also be given. For instance, as Satsvarup Das Goswami recalls, I was with His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, in Australia in 1974 when he spoke on several occasions to church leaders and audiences of seminarians. While telling about Lord Chaitanya's universal Sankirtan movement of chanting God's holy names, Srila Prabhupada would explain that Christians could also take part by chanting the name of Jesus Christ. He pointed out that the word Christ comes from the Greek word Christos, is, is philologically related to the name Krishna. He also said that if, along with chanting Christos, Christians would give up slaughtering animals and eating meat, they would advance in spiritual realization. In discussion with Christians, Srila Prabhupada almost always hampered on the point, thou shalt not kill. I asked the Christians so many times that your Bible says, thou shalt not kill. Why are you killing? They cannot give any satisfactory answer. For instance, when speaking with Cardinal Daniello, the head of the Catholic Church in France, Srila Prabhupada belabored the point, how can you support that animal killing is not sin? Chapter 8. I wanted to try uh, Shira Sham Prabhuji. I will try to see if I can give you the speaking grant access and just try to see if you can speak up. Shidhar Sham Prabhu, I have given you access on mic. See if you can speak something for us. Just wanted to try out something.
Me now?
Shidhar
Can
Sham
you hear
Prabhuji,
me? Can you hear me?
we can hear you. Brilliant.
You can clear?
एक बार फिर
Is
से
it
बोलें प्रभु जी.
is it clear, Prabhuji? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
बिल्कुल
Hare
क्लियर
Bol.
है. आप रीड करना चाहोगे कुछ पेजों के लिए
Yes,
प्रभु जी?
Prabhuji. Yes,
आप
Prabhuji.
मैं
I
यहाँ
can
से
try.
ये या मैं यहाँ से चलाता रहूंगा या.
Hmm. Thank you, Prabhu.
थैंक यू.
Hare Krishna, Vancha Kalpatarubhyasya, Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha. Chapter 8. Who is qualified to speak strongly? To fight for Krishna is a privilege accorded to topmost devotees, transcendental titans of the order of Hanuman, Arjuna, Srila Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and our own most worshipable Srila Prabhupada. It is the great mercy of these eternal associates of Krishna that they have accorded to even much less qualified persons like ourselves the opportunity to enroll as foot soldiers in the battle against all in the world that is not Krishna conscious. Particularly, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ordered all devotees to preach Jar dekhe tare kaha Krishna upadesh. Speak the instructions of Krishna to whomever you meet. Srila Prabhupada often quoted this edict, and he himself obeyed it by speaking the instructions of Krishna in their pristine, forceful brilliance. Nevertheless, there is a common misconception that Srila Prabhupada's manner of delivery is not to be attempted by persons of lesser stature and realization. The devotees must become as pure as he before they can speak as plainly as he did. To support this theory, an anecdote is often cited how, after Srila Prabhupada had spoken pointedly to an Indian consul regarding some official work, he told an attendant disciple, I can do this, but you cannot. I am an old man. They don't take me seriously. But if you were to speak to someone who was older than you or your age, and if you speak very strongly, they will become offended. But I am an old man, so I can do this, but you cannot. Similarly, one time in London, Srila Prabhupada called two visitors cats and dogs, which they admitted to. After they had departed, Srila Prabhupada told his disciples, I can say things like that, but you may not be able to do so. These anecdotes certainly indicate that not all devotees are qualified to speak as straightforwardly as did Srila Prabhupada. Yet, they do not nullify his multiple instructions to disseminate the unadulterated truth. After his strong words to the consul, Srila Prabhupada mentioned the prerogative of being old, not pure, for rebuking others. From this may be derived the important lesson that few people are ready to accept sermonizing from persons who are considerably younger than themselves. Still, notwithstanding Srila Prabhupada's having once counseled a young bodied devotee to not be forceful with seniors, there are many occurrences of his ordering his followers to speak out loud and clear, and of his pleasure when his disciples did so. On one occasion, addressing his disciples as young boys, he specifically ordered them to preach strongly. There, Therefore, it is not true that Srila Prabhupada debarred non geriatrics from assertive preaching, although the elderly may possess a special allowance for doing so, particularly in cultures where seniority is respected, as among Indians, many of whom were recipients of Srila Prabhupada's stern mercy. There's a footnote. Huh? Okay. Footnote. While writing this at age 55, I invoke a somewhat premature special old age dispensation to exonerate myself from accusations of extremism. Furthermore, I exhort all elderly devotees desirous of following Srila Prabhupada's example to sally forth in the last stage of life and, availing of their age advantage, uninhibitedly speak the truth as Srila Prabhupada spoke it. Nor is there any record of Srila Prabhupada's having stated that one must become as pure as he is as a prerequisite for preaching as stridently as he did. On the contrary, Srila Prabhupada rejected such a proposal. Quote, Guest, you can't preach until you are purified. Srila Prabhupada, no, purification will go on. If you make a condition that first of all you become qualified, then you preach, that will never come. If speaking, unquote, if speaking of Krishna's message as it is should be limited to only the most advanced devotees, then the rest of us would be obliged to make weak presentations that are not really Krishna's message at all. Then the whole unmodified truth, which so needs to be broadcast widely to everyone, would be spoken by only a few, and the limited message that most devotees would preach would be discordant with that of the advanced Vaishnavas. Still, it is pertinent to question whether devotees who are still influenced by the illusory energy, as are most devotional practitioners in this world, are properly qualified to condemn all that is non devotional. Certainly, Srila Prabhupada was fully pure and especially empowered and was thus entitled to speak intensely. But according to some, those who, without being similarly qualified, attempt to speak as strongly as Srila Prabhupada did, are merely imitating. In Vaishnav parlance, imitation means to copy form and style as if to pose as on a level with the person imitated. So, although devotees should not imitate Srila Prabhupada, for instance, by making a habit of grabbing opponents' shirts, Srila Prabhupada, footnote, Srila Prabhupada did this in an incident described in Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, chapter 7.3. They should attempt to follow his example of preaching dynamically, yet without pride or false ego, knowing that the indispensable qualification for speaking the truth of Shastra is not ultimate purity or full realization, but the faith and sincerity to distribute that truth unchanged. Quote, if I am a child and I ask my father, what is this, my father? The father says, my dear child, it is called coconut. Then, if I distribute this knowledge, this is coconut. My knowledge is perfect. I may not be perfect, but because I have heard it from my father, who is perfect about the knowledge of this fruit, so I have taken that word from my father and I am preaching. This is coconut, and this is perfect. So, our Krishna consciousness movement is like that. We are simply repeating the perfect statement of our predecessor. If I receive the knowledge from Bhagwan, and if I distribute the same knowledge as Bhagwan has said, without any interpretation of my cheating policy, then the knowledge which I distribute is also perfect. I may not be perfect, but if I present the knowledge which I have taken from Krishna as it is, without any interpretation, then what I gave you is perfect. End quote. Although a devotee may not be fully realized that he firmly believes in the message of Shastra as delivered by Srila Prabhupada is itself an important. Okay. Although a devotee may not be fully realized that he firmly believes in the message of Shastra as delivered by Srila Prabhupada is itself an important realization and is a qualification to preach as he did and as he ordered us to. Srila Prabhupada directly authorized devotees of lesser realization to speak the message of Shastra with the proviso that they only repeat the teachings of Krishna as given in Shastra. Quote, Hari Shori, when we go out and preach and we just repeat or try to repeat whatever we have heard from the spiritual master, but we may not have fully realized what we are speaking about, does that somehow or another reduce the potency of the Gita or the Bhagavatam or Srila Prabhupada? Yes, realization takes time. Therefore, there is no question of realization. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, you simply repeat as Krishna says, that will save you. That the idea that only the completely pure are entitled to preach strongly is as absurd as the proposition that only parents who are perfect in all respects are fit to impart moral instructions to their children, or that the police and judiciary should be comprised of wholly irreproachable persons. Certainly, parents, police, and judges need to be of good character to properly discharge their responsibilities. But to demand that no one but an utter saint should accept such roles would be so unpragmatic as to be socially irresponsible. Similarly, to insist that forthright presentation of Krishna consciousness be limited to Paramhamsas not only attempts to dissolve the duty of devotees to broadcast the truth, which alone can bestow genuine welfare to all living beings, but also attempts to abrogate the Shastric injunction that it is not Paramhamsas but Madhyamadhikaris, advanced yet possibly not fully purified devotees who are primarily meant for preaching. The Madhyamadhikari, by definition and right, is qualified and duty bound to repeat the weighty message of Guru Sadhu Shastra. End note. That preaching is especially meant for Madhyamadhikaris is further discussed in chapter 12, learning how to preach strongly. Unfortunately, devotees who are committed to faithfully iterating the message of Guru Sadhu Shastra are denounced as imitators by persons who have no intentions to follow Srila Prabhupada's example of combating everything bogus. But should we simply tolerate bogus avatars, bogus philosophies, bogus everything? Should we just smile at people and think, later, if I become pure, I might say something? Or maybe offer a polite, mild protest as if presenting just one opinion among many? Myself being one who is sometimes accused of imitating Srila Prabhupada, I do not hesitate to admit the obvious. I am not on the same plane as Srila Prabhupada. I am nowhere near his level of purity and expertise. But Srila Prabhupada exhorted his followers to come to the same standard as he by being knowledgeable and accepting the preaching challenge. Quote, the servant should be as good as the master. That is servant, because sometimes servants may be challenged. So that is the qualification of Krishna's servant. Krishna's servant must be always equipped because they have to meet so many opposing elements. Practically, the whole material world is full of Tushkritam. They want to create God. They don't want to become servant of God. That is their challenge. Therefore, anyone who is claiming to become servant of God, Krishna, he must be well equipped to meet the challenging spirit of others. End quote. Preachers who aspire to represent Srila Prabhupada should come to the standard of being like him, fully competent to challenge opponents. As Srila Prabhupada told reporters from national newspapers upon his arrival in London in 1969, quote, some of you are saying there is no God. Some of you are saying God is dead. And some of you are saying God is impersonal or void. These are all nonsense. I want to teach all this nonsense that there is God. That is my mission. Any nonsense can come to me. I shall prove that there is God. Any scientist, any philosopher, and logician may come and we shall prove that there is God and we have got eternal relationship with God. That is my Krishna consciousness movement. It is a challenge to the atheistic people. Speaking strongly necessarily entails speaking knowledgeably. Considering that no one can know everything and that specialization in any field is generally for only a few, most devotees should focus on presenting Shastric understanding as Srila Prabhupada did, in a manner suitable for the modern milieu and addressing the major challenges it faces. Sadhus are supposed to be proficient in spiritual knowledge and should be able to present it authoritatively, not merely offer unsubstantiated or insipid opinions. Just as a doctor, electrician, or mechanic must possess requisite qualifications, so a sadhu, one whose life's focus is spiritual cultivation, should know his subject thoroughly and on that basis be able to impart unequivocal spiritual advice. What is the meaning of preaching if one cannot confidently and competently state and defend his position, explaining the knowledge of Shastra for the benefit of others? It would be presumptuous for anyone to enter into debates on technical issues, for instance, the intricacies of evolutionary theory, unless he is thoroughly knowledgeable in that field, up to date on its present nuances, and in all other ways meticulously prepared. Harishwari Das noted, quote, despite his often humorous critiques and sometimes general condemnations of the modern materialistic scientists, Prabhupada cautioned that any attempt to preach on a scientific basis must be done expertly. When a devotee told him of plans to publish a magazine in Sweden with articles challenging the material scientists, Prabhupada warned him, don't write anything nonsense. It must be very solid. Otherwise, you will be laughing stock. One must be confident before challenging others. In all stages, he must be able to defend himself from the opposing elements. Then such challenge is all right. We are confident that this soul cannot be manufactured by any material combination. Therefore, we can challenge and we can defend ourselves in any stage. It may be said, only if one can speak strongly without upsetting others should he do so. Granted, if a preacher frequently causes uproars, he should be restrained. He probably should be restrained. And generally, it may be said that a devotee is qualified to speak strongly if he is a good judge of what is appropriate to be stated straightforwardly according to the recipients and the situation. However, even the most prudent speakers of the truth cannot avoid sometimes inflaming others, simply because most people of this world harbor deep seated antagonism toward the truth. It is impossible to predict how any individual will react to the outright words of even the most expert preacher. Some persons may acquiesce, while others may flare up and note. This also happened with Srila Prabhupada. His calling a man a dog, see page 30, could have occasioned a riot. Fortunately, instead, the crowd gave a standing ovation and the man acquiesced by smiling. However, when in another public program, Srila Prabhupada had an on-stage argument with a hippie, many in the crowd became disturbed and left. Coming back. Yet overall, devotees who aspire to follow Srila Prabhupada's example of clearly distinguishing reality from illusion will, by his grace, be effective in doing so. Therefore, those who opine, although Srila Prabhupada spoke strongly, others should not, not only disregard Srila Prabhupada's instruction to speak strongly, but also indirectly fault Srila Prabhupada for his outspokenness, sometimes caused the very outrage and adverse publicity that many devotees today are so anxious to avoid. Accepting that Srila Prabhupada spoke only the truth, why not accept that same truth regardless of who utters it? Is it truth only when spoken by Srila Prabhupada? Refusal to accept a statement that was originally made by Srila Prabhupada merely because someone else has reiterated it is tantamount to rejecting what Srila Prabhupada said. Moreover, the position that Srila Prabhupada said certain things that no one else can say could be used to suppress any comment made by Srila Prabhupada that one does not like, thus affording a tool for interpreting and redefining Srila Prabhupada according to personal whims. We have no right to censor Krishna and his representatives. Krishna says that those who do not surrender to him are mulas. Anyone who protests the reutterance of this or similar statements simply proves himself to be in that same category of mulas. Chapter 9, A Lonely Path. Undoubtedly, the path of boldly speaking the uncompromised truth is a lonely one. By following the example set by the predecessor Vaishnava Acharyas, the straight shooting preacher cannot expect to be popular. More likely, he will be rejected, insulted, sometimes even by persons presumed to be devotees, or physically assaulted. As Srila Prabhupada sometimes quoted, Sacha bole to mare latha लाठा झूठा jagat bhulaye. One who speaks the truth gets beaten with sticks, for all the world is deluded by lies. The fighting preacher nurtures his love for Krishna not by artificially cultivating remembrance of pastimes far beyond his eligibility to comprehend, but by serving the mission of the liberated acharyas who can grant admission into the transcendental realm. The resolute preacher places his life in Krishna's hands, pledging to spend his whole life on the battlefield of preaching, combating a Maya that will never cease. Without caring for comfort, safety, or personal reputation, he valiantly refuses to compromise the truth because he has full faith that Krishna is the supreme controller and wants his message promulgated and that he will surely protect his loyal servants. Quote, we have got Krishna. We are not afraid in challenging anyone. I believe in that formula. Unquote. As stated by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati shortly before his passing away. Quote, I have most probably given many people troubles in the mind. Some of them might have thought that I am their enemy because I was obliged to speak the plain truth for service and devotion toward the absolute Godhead. I have given them all those troubles only so that they may turn their face toward the personality of Godhead without any desire for gain and with unalloyed devotion. I hope some day or other they may understand me rightly. End quote. Srila Prabhupada made a similar apology in his final days, asking to be forgiven for all his offenses. This should not be misconstrued to mean that Srila Prabhupada was actually wrong and therefore his followers should not repeat the same mistake. Such a misinterpretation regarding our Acharya is certainly rascaldom, for it seeks to cast Srila Prabhupada as a conditioned soul and to negate his whole mission and strategy. Rather, those words of Srila Prabhupada should be understood as an expression of utmost humility and an indication that when speaking forthrightly as a genuine preacher must, even the purest and most expert of devotees cannot avoid alienating at least some people. But others are saved. Strong preachers change lives. That is their ecstasy. They may initially have to fight, yet they repeatedly relish the nectar of seeing apparently incorrigible materialists become convinced of Krishna consciousness. There is no greater gratification for a battling preacher than to witness a vociferous adversary of Krishna consciousness becoming a firm adherent. The pious compromiser can never know such transcendental pleasure, not even after decades of smiling and politeness. Furthermore, strong preachers, although not many, can relish the company of other purified men who are thoroughly honest. For essence seekers, the association of even one such genuine, straightforward person is infinitely more desirable than that of legions of diplomatic types whose words are not one with their heart and whose intentions can only be guessed at, who are duplicitous and untrustworthy due to pursuing a personal agenda. Although the path of speaking out for Krishna is a less trodden one, it is a sure one that leads directly and swiftly to Krishna.
Thank you so much, Sridhar Sham Prabhu.
Hare
This
Krishna.
was nectar. Thank you. So what we can do is other time also, Prabhuji, I'll take the mic from you now. Yeah.
Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you
Please.
so much. Thank you. Uh, if there are other devotees who would like to read also, please, if you chat, otherwise I will within 10 seconds start reading more. Yeah. Anybody wants to read? 5, 6. Yeah. I see someone. Apurva Anand Prabhu. Just 1 second. Yeah. I hope you have a good internet connection, Apurva Prabhu. Just give me 1 minute. I have given you access, Prabhu, and I am moving. Can you say Hare Krishna? Apurva Prabhu, you have the mic access.
Hare Krishna.
Apurva Prabhu, if
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna,
Yes,
please,
you can hear me, right?
we can hear you.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Chapter 10: Absolutism, Relativism, Conservatism, Liberalism. The contemporary Western psyche fosters deep suspicion of doctrines that claim unquestionable correctness. The effect of centuries of evil enacted in the name of religion, and more recently, the horrors of Nazism and the oppressiveness of communism have been major factors in the risk of relativism in Western thought. Nowadays, so pronounced that many people unquestioningly reject any form of absolutism. In recent years, an upsurge of religious fundamentalism, ranging from inane evangelizing to terrorism in the name of God, has further spawned widespread distrust of religion, and especially in unbending religious doctrines. Particularly in America, society is becoming increasingly divided between left wing liberals and right wing conservatives. But to simplistically package people according to a generalization overlooks the nuances and complexity of the issues over which they differ. For instance, within the current cultural context, to invoke the term liberal paints for some a picture of a reasonable, progressive intellectual who is aghast at the mutterings of a close minded zealots intent upon dragging mankind back to the dark ages. Whereas for others, the liberal is an unprincipled, godless supporter of depravity. And while some right wing ultras are ready to kill over certain moral causes, such as countering abortion, it is inaccurate and unfair to identify all persons of orthodox or traditionalist leaning as being supportive of such dangerous antisocial elements. Certainly, the designations of conservative and liberal are applicable even among devotees. But to overly emphasize such loaded terms and to adopt the assumptions about a person that each label tends to impose, which reflect the contemporary materialistic outlook rather than that of Shastra, unnecessarily risks putting devotees at opposition, whereas all sincere devotees simply aspire to become conduits of the Lord's mercy upon the conditioned souls. Undoubtedly, some conflict between the two stances is inevitable, because devotees who have a more pragmatic approach aim primarily for immediate results, such as acceptability or impact that is relative to the world today, whereas devotees of more idealistic bent emphasize protecting the pristine absolute values of Vaishnavism and are concerned with the long term consequences of introducing foreign elements into Vaishnava culture. But actually, Krishna consciousness is both absolute in recognizing Krishna as the uncontestable supreme reality and relative in appreciating that all are on Krishna's path in all respects. Srila Prabhupada taught us to not narrow mindedly tout Vaishnavism as the sole manifestation of spirituality, but to sensibly accept that God reveals himself in varying degrees in contrasting cultures and climes. However, Vaishnavism is ultimately more absolutist than accommodating, and its acknowledgement of certain doctrines is not without caveats. While devotees do not claim a monopoly on God, they realistically uphold that Vaishnavism alone offers thorough, perfect knowledge concerning God and how to approach Him, whereas others have only vague ideas and sentiments. Furthermore, Vaishnavism condemns as sinful much of the behavior, such as animal slaughter and consumption of alcohol, that is widely accepted or even deemed sacred within the world's great religions. From Krishna conscious perspective, the world's cultural polarization is between misplaced absolutism and misplaced relativism, both of which present the bound jiva with worldviews conducive for prolonged forgetfulness of Krishna. Thoughtless absolutism either misrepresents the actual point or grasps the wrong point, thus being a zealous but misguided charge in the wrong direction. But relativism denies that there even is a specific point to be grasped, thus providing no direction. In rejecting the irrationality of blind absolutism, relativism is similarly irrational, irrationally dogmatic in insisting that there can be no absolute harmonizing principle. In its attempt to avoid the excesses of absolutism, relativism casts the individual as the arbiter of knowledge, experience, and morality. Although promoted as freedom of the spirit, relativism actually binds the jiva to material existence by obfuscating the inescapable fact of his eternal subordination to the supreme absolute Sri Krishna, whose lotus feet are the only reliable shelter from all peril, whether spawned by relativism or incorrect absolutism. Neither misguided absolutists nor relativists are seeking the truth. Misguided absolutists are convinced that they have already attained the truth, whereas relativists doubt that an ultimate truth exists. Among these two classes, generally only the relativists will give devotees a hearing, for they profess to be open minded and willing to learn about what they consider to be others' views. The challenge for Vaishnava preachers is to unambiguously and uncompromisingly communicate the message of Krishna consciousness to all types of persons, yet to do so non dogmatically, not simply making pronouncements, but by explaining the philosophy in a cogent, reasonable manner, scientifically, that is, rationally and logically, as Srila Prabhupada did.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for reading this chapter. I think with that, uh, this was good. And Prabhuji, please pardon me, Apurva Prabhu, if you have an initiated name I'm not
Yes,
aware
Prabhu,
of.
my name is Asita Das.
Dandavad Pranam. Asit Das from Kannada,
No, Prabhu, from Punjab.
Punjab. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Please, my forgive me. I do not know uh, the name, but thank you so much for reading it. It was good. So, others also, since we have discovered this feature, I encourage. Only thing, please have a good internet connection and a good sound system around you. We love to do like what we experimented today. I think it went very beautifully with Shidham Sham Prabhu. Apurva, and Asit
Asit.
Prabhu. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu, for giving us opportunity to serve Srila Prabhupada.
No, you were lucky to be chosen on Ekadasi day.
Okay.
Thank you. Others also, I encourage. And basically, you can use the same concept and then do it at other places. Thank you so much, Shri Sham Prabhuji, Asit Prabhu, Krishna Keshav Prabhu, and everyone.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
वंशकल्पातरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिंधुभ्येव च पतितनां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो namo namah. So for tomorrow, in case more devotees want to read, please let us know, and then we'll ensure everybody get a chance to read. Yeah, just keep a good internet connection at your place, and um, that's all. Yeah, thank you so much. Hare Krishna. We'll end the broadcast here.